right, hello everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of the year, Navigating Uncertainty, Preparing Your CIP, TIP for the Unexpected. My name is Corey Norton. I'm part of the sales leadership team here at Origo, and on behalf of the entire team, I want to say thank you for joining us. If you're unfamiliar with what we do here at Origo, we're an end-to-end platform for owners like yourselves, designed to help with all aspects of not only your planning process, which we'll be discussing today, but through build and construction management and operations like right-of-way as well. We've been in the industry for 21 years and have developed relationships with agencies of every size, some of whom we have with us this afternoon. Now for a little housekeeping before I introduce our guests and pass things over to get started. First, this webinar will be recorded and sent along with the deck to everyone who's registered for the event. And most importantly, we want to make sure that we cover as much of what you came here to learn as we can. So if you have any questions throughout the conversations our panelists will be having, please submit them to the Q&A box. And at the end of the presentation, I'll be back to review them with the panelists. Speaking of our panelists, today we are joined by Caroline Mays, who's a senior level leader with more than 24 years of multimodal transportation planning, programming, policy, project development, and implementation experience at the local, regional, state, and international levels, having held various leadership roles at all 4 levels. Ms. Mays currently serves as the Director of Planning and Modal Programs for the Texas Department of Transportation and has held numerous positions since joining the agency in 2012. She also serves as the Vice Chair of the AASHTO Special Committee on Freight and is a member of the Transportation Research Board's Planning and Logistics Committee, as well as the World Road Association Technical Committee on Freight as a representative of AASHTO and the United States. We're also joined by Pamela Steinbach, the Director of Planning for the Delaware Department of Transportation. She's been a member of the DOT for over 20 years and served throughout the agency in various roles, including road design, maintenance, asset management, and planning. Ms. Steinbach graduated from the University of Delaware with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering and enjoys traveling the world to see how different places address their transportation infrastructure challenges. A huge thank you to both of you for joining us this afternoon. I know your schedules are busy, but I appreciate you taking the time to allow us to have this discussion. We are also joined today by our Senior Marketing Manager here at Origo, Stephanie Pedroza, who I will pass things over to right after a quick poll.
All right.
So, yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
I was going to let you do it.
All right, excellent. So just to get an idea of who we have joining us this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are. So which of the following best describes your organization? Roads and bridges, water, wastewater, transit and rail, or other? We'll take just a minute here. If you can pop that in, we'll take a look at the results to see who we have joining us this afternoon.
All right, we'll give it a couple more seconds. It looks like more people are coming in. All right, let's look at the results. So about 33% with roads and bridges, rail and transit, some with other and water. So we have a pretty good mix of people in our audience. And we have one more poll. So which of the following best describes your role? Are you in project management, capital planning and finance, engineering, a consultant, admin, or other? So if you can take just a couple of seconds to answer the poll question. I want to say we need to figure out a game that we play or something while we wait for these couple of seconds of poll questions, because there is always that awkward silence.
I'm always in favor for the Jeopardy music.
Yeah, you know what? We're going to figure that out. Next time there might be Jeopardy music. All right, so let's go to the results. We have a lot of project managers, a lot of people in capital planning and finance, engineers, and consultants. All right. Well, welcome to everyone from my end to the very first webinar of 2024. And I'm excited to kick off this series with the topic of uncertainty. I think everyone here can agree that the only thing certain in our world is uncertainty. And navigating risk is inherited in nearly every decision that we make. And right now, our nation is dealing with a lot of uncertain circumstances that are impacting our CIP. And government agencies nationwide are challenged with the difficult task of managing risk and fortifying their capital improvement programs. So today, our panel of experts, and thank you ladies so much for joining us, are going to discuss risk management strategies that they're doing at their agencies, how they're collaborating with stakeholders, and how they're leveraging technology to help reduce risk. So before we get started, though, I do want to know from the audience, which of the following risk factors has affected your capital programs significantly? Some of the ones up here are probably some of the most common ones that we've seen. We have political shifts, regulatory changes, funding concerns, supply chain disruptions, and natural disasters. So if you can take a couple of seconds to answer the poll. And Caroline and Pam, which of these uncertainties do you think is going to be the most popular out of our audience?
They're all so good. They all have their challenges. I would probably say right off the bat, I think the easiest one to quantify would be supply chain disruptions.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that. And then certainly, funding concerns is another one. And I would say kind of next to that is political shifts, because if priorities changes and that could impact, capital programs. But funding is a big one. Yeah.
Funding, I definitely think funding is probably the one that we hear the most from our customers and agencies that we talk to, but also supply chains lately have been a big one since the pandemic. And I don't know. Okay, let's see. So the highest one was funding concerns, was at 63%. Supply chain disruptions was right under there. So you ladies were definitely correct on there. All right. Well, let's move on. So these are the uncertainties that we had in the poll below. And right now we're seeing just everything that's happening. Supply chains have been a disruption for years, where a lot of materials aren't getting delivered, which is causing project deliveries. And we also have regulatory changes. There's always constant changes. Fundings are always an issue. It can either be we have too many funds, which is sometimes never the case, or we don't have enough funds. So I'm going to open up the discussion. And Caroline, can you kind of give us an idea, how has the evolving landscape of uncertainty in our industry affected the state of Texas in their capital improvement programs?
Yeah, thank you again, for the invitation to, share what is going on here in Texas with our capital program, but also the uncertainties. Certainly, I'll talk a little bit about what our capital program is quickly, but then also touch on, I think things shifted. Pamela will probably touch on this. COVID kind of turned our lives upside down in what was the normal, and now we're kind of in this new normal, environment where things are still changing and things are still fluid. I don't think any of us has kind of reached to say, okay, we're back to where we were in 2019 or early 2020. So with that said, in Texas, when I'm looking at some of these issues here, the first is we don't have a CIP. We have a document we call the Unified Transportation Program. It's a 10-year program that really allows us and guides our funding and development of transportation projects across the state. And you can imagine a state as big as Texas, this last year, that whole portfolio was over $100 billion over 10 years. And then normally what we do is we have a 4-year component of that, which is the STIP. So that's kind of how we, divvy up that document. So that document identifies, one, how much funding we expect to have over the next 10 years. And then we distribute that across the state on our strategic goal areas, whether it's safety, bridges, road expansions, et cetera. And then it also includes that, it really includes projects, like I said, in the shorter term, the 4-year window that will actually, be funded. And then the final component of this plan is that we have 12 funding categories that are identified. We have federal funds, we have state funds, and that's how we program all of those categories based on the federal requirements, state requirements. And then this document is actually legislated required. We have to adopt and approve it every year. So we have to update it every year. And I think that, is to one of the questions later, how do we manage the risk and uncertainty? Because we update it every year, we're at least able to catch some of the issues and challenges before they happen. So just a little bit on that landscape. And then kind of how we have been managing the uncertainty. Certainly once COVID hit, we saw price escalations, projects coming in 50% over the engineer's estimate, and really to challenge us in our program delivery because, okay, you have a 10-year program, we already divvied up funding for the different projects, but now where do we get the funding to, we call it kind of to close the gap in all of those price escalation, inflation issues that we dealt with. So what our leadership did, was we developed what we call a 25% flexibility. And that really allowed our commission, which is the board, to allow us to, if a project came 25%, over or less, we don't have to go to them for every single project because when we were going back to them for every single project every month. So that allowed us as staff to be able to, address that uncertainty of price escalations, supply chain costs that really, plagued a lot of the project, development process. And this was unprecedented because we had never done it before, to be able to do that. So it was a policy decision made at the highest level to really help us still deliver on the projects we had programmed and to let those projects move forward. But that meant that, we were shifting some of the projects out. And really what happened was we ended up using more of our rehab and maintenance dollars as stopgaps because we didn't have extra funding sitting somewhere. So that was one of the short-term kind of implications we had, whereby we're borrowing Peter to kind of pay Paul, and later on, there were other strategies and measures put in place to help to fill that, that bank account that we had borrowed from another funding category to do this cost overruns or cost increases. So that's kind of how we dealt with that uncertainty in our CIP program, and primarily out of COVID, supply chain disruptions, cost issues. We even looked at things like highway cost index and try to figure out, to be able to anticipate that, but it was almost impossible to anticipate. So a little bit, I'll stop there. Hopefully, at least that gives the audience a lay of the land for Texas.
Yeah. And Pam, how is Delaware managing uncertainty in their CIPs?
Yeah, sure. So thank you. Thank you. I expressed the same thing as the thanks that Carolina said. Thank you for asking us to, it'll be a good combo of the second to smallest state compared to the largest one and what we do. So just to give just the audience a little bit of a background on Delaware. We maintain nearly 90% of the roads in Delaware. So we, unlike some larger DOTs, we have everything from like local roads that have like 500 ADT all the way up to 95. So there are a lot of broad range programs. Plus we are the lowest lying state in the US. So we do have a lot of risk with our flood, like our sunny day flooded roadways. So that's a part of our risk management that we have to like keep in our minds. But specifically with our CIP and managing risk, like Caroline had said, we have supply chain issues. The cost of construction inspection has like skyrocketed. I'm not exactly sure what the like nexus of that is, but like the construction inspections for our construction projects have been across the board high. And then we also have a challenge with all of the work that that the bill funding had brought forth. We don't have as many in-house engineers and planners, and that's always been a systemic problem normally for DOTs, that we do have to pay more for consultant work, being that we don't have that like big bench of in-house planners and engineers. So that funding, we do have a pretty stable toll infrastructure and toll revenue. We are, everybody that's in PA, New York, Jersey, if they want to go to the Delaware beaches, they have to come through 2 tolls through Delaware. And we have become innovative in changing up. So during the week, those tolls each way are $1, but on like Friday from like 5 or 7 p.m. till Monday early in the morning, those tolls jump to $3. So we have tried to do some, and that has brought forth a big amount of toll funding. But that type of general uncertainty with risks has changed up the way that we do things. Like Caroline, we do have the 4-year CIP, but our capital transportation plan is for 6 years. So we do have some play in those last 2 years to be able to either push projects out if they needed to be pushed out, or pull them forward if we do have some extra funding with that.
And now the next question is, how are we adapting our capital program frameworks for just any emerging uncertainties to come? Because we also have natural disasters that can hit. I know in Vermont, they got hit with heavy rains that just disrupted all of their transportation. Also in Texas, you get a lot of natural disasters. So how are we adapting our frameworks to help with uncertainty? And I don't know if you ladies can give any successful examples from your state. So Pam, I'll start with you, and then I'll have Caroline answer that.
Yeah, would be happy to. So over the last few years, we have changed up the way that we input new projects into our CTP. So right now we are on a every 2-year cycle. So the new, so we're actually, this year, we're gonna be adding 13 new projects into our CTP. And that is in addition to, so we have about 108 or so line item projects that like specifically have a name, like SR1 widening from, dot, dot, to dot, dot. But we also have a ton of roll-up grouped projects. So like our pavement management, our bridge program, our transportation resiliency and sustainability, our safety programs, all of those are grouped roll-up projects. So they get a certain pot of money, and then they can allocate certain, like if a project is having more right-of-way issues, they can kind of slow down that project, and if there's a project that's ready to be advertised, they can pull it up. So having that flexibility is great. One of the other things that we have done is that we have, it used to be where when we added a new project into the CTP, we allocated the funding to project development, to preliminary engineering, to right-of-way, and to construction. So we put associated funding amounts to all of those phases. And we have found that that is not the best thing to do, at least for our state, due to all of the uncertainty of, like, we do the NEPA alternatives Pell stuff during our planning studies, but we actually don't go into full NEPA until preliminary engineering. So we really have no idea what the actual design of the project is going to be. So we have a huge change that we have done is that all of these 13 new projects are going to be added to the CTP with either project development or preliminary engineering only. We are not going to put amounts in for right-of-way or construction until we know that we have a decent cost estimate for that project, because finance has been having to like shift coconuts like all over the place to like fund things. So we have kind of helped ourselves to do that. Now the proof in the pudding is going to be once we determine that preferred alternative and NEPA is finished, how are we then going to adjust our CTP to fund those right-of-way and construction phases? So more to come on that. We have not gone that far. Like we're only working on the 4-year financially constrained part of the CTP. And then the last thing I will note specifically for, as you said, with successful examples, is that our engineers were, always very optimistic in terms of when they were going to get plans PS&E, thinking that everything was going to go well and the right-of-way is going to be fine and the utility relocation work's going to be great. So we have always been very optimistic on how fast we can deliver a project. And they are wonderful and great people, but they don't, we have not been great at that estimation. So we have intentionally over-programmed our CTP to allow for those things being pushed out. So we have to, I think with probably most DOTs, we have to report on like how much money we're spending and not spending, and try to get into that sweet spot. So that overestimation has worked out well in our favor. So I'm sorry, that was like super long, but there's a lot of good success examples.
Yeah, no. And sometimes overestimating can help, but I remember, Caroline, you were saying sometimes overestimating doesn't help. So in Texas, can you give any successful examples of how you guys have managed your capital programs or adapted your capital programs when uncertainties hit?
Yeah, so like Pam mentioned, it's kind of a call it the dancing song. We have all of these funding pots and categories, so we really have to look at which ones we can program at a programmatic level compared to ones where we program at a project level. So like bridge and safety, and we have other categories like preventative maintenance that we don't really put it at a project. It's more programmatic level. It's a needs based. If things need to be done, that's what is used for because it's not prescriptive. And then we also, in our case, we're actually very lucky at our commission level. We have a funding pot which is called strategic priorities. So they kind of decide on what are those statewide strategic priorities they would like to fund. So that's kind of how we do it. But really systematically, what we do is we don't program 100%. So let's say in the strategic priorities, we get $10 billion. We won't program the entire 10 billion. We'll program, let's say, $8.5 billion, and then we leave kind of $1.5 billion cushion to be able to address what you just mentioned. If we get Hurricane Harvey, we don't have a funding category for hurricanes. So now looking at, okay, how much do we have in preventative maintenance? How much do we have in safety, district discretionary, et cetera, that can fund that? And then what is needed above and beyond that, because we don't want to deplete what we already have in those categories. So the unprogrammed portions generally is what we use to go and address, a hurricane coming or fire or something that we did not anticipate in our programming. And then those are the short term. So if we program everything to the longer term, let's say 6, 7, 8, and 9, we have the flexibility to, what we call, we kind of bring that funding. We can take funding from those projects and bring it to shorter term needs to be able to address, because we can always go back next cycle and fill that gap in, let's say, 2027 or 2028. So we have several flexibility because this happens all the time. So that's why we build in all of that flexibility from a programmatic level and not put everything at the project level.
Okay. And I think that will guide us into our next topic of risk management strategies. And Caroline, you were talking about shifting priorities based on whatever uncertainties come our way. And I think the only way to actually deal with uncertainty is to reduce risk. So Caroline, can you just kind of discuss more on how Texas is approaching risk management and how you're moving priorities whenever things shift around?
Yeah, this is an area whereby we spend a lot of time. We have like a whole division. That's one holistically. We have what is called the Risk Prevention and Management Program within the DOT. And their role is everything from how we run our programs, meaning, our regular work efforts from grant management to everything, you name it, so that's really a holistic view, and it's a proactive approach to look at our internal program, what's working, what's not working, identify those risks and figure out how we mitigate them. And look at opportunities for business process improvement. So that's kind of the big picture. But when it comes to actually programming and our UTP or CIP, especially when COVID came and we saw all of this cost escalation, there was actually a whole branch of risk management that went into looking at that and really take a holistic approach. And some of the things we looked at was what are we currently doing, how we're doing it, what is working, what's not working, what is needed to improve the outcomes. And what we did was, and this is just from the programmatic side, with the cost escalations, and now looked at things like cost estimates, because that was one of our biggest issues. And then understanding some of the econometric stuff. We never looked at supply chain issues. And when we looked at the bids and you saw some of the line items, were like, whoa, supply chain delays and how much all of that was costing us. So what we did was really look at three components of, when we look at cost escalation, how we're programming in our CIP, we looked at external. First, external, looking at market issues, and the market issues includes inflation, oil, labor issues. We had labor issues within the DOT, but labor issues within the contracting community. Materials availability, some of them they would order and it's going to take 24 months. You have project going on, or will start in a couple months, and they're telling you the lead time is going to be 18 months. So how do we deal with that? Supply chain issues were definitely some of the factors we started looking at with our external market issues. But then there's the external non-market issues, and really a lot of those were kind of this front loading, unbalanced bidding from external. And really just looking at the bidding strategies and predicting outcomes, and then industry perception and expectations on the costs, because they were inflating some of their costs as well, because they're thinking, okay, what is going to happen? I bid on this project, it's let. What is my cost going to be 3 years from now? Because this is a 5-year project. So we're seeing a lot of that on the external side. But then on the internal side, also, we started looking to see what are really our actions inside that's creating the risk and how we can manage it, So some of the things we looked at is, really standards. We lacked specificity in our standards. Once we started looking at it closely, and unclear plans. So some of it, yes, we may have plans that were developed 3, 4, 5 years ago. But now, how do we kind of review and we look before we just put it out for bid? And then two more is just short time frames to review for contract reviews. That was also one of our biggest challenges, because we'll have staffing issues and lack of contractor availability and bandwidth. So we saw a lot of projects slip through, because now the contractors are overwhelmed and they have people going from one job to the other. And then the political pressures, I think was mentioned earlier, really that was a big issue for us as well. Okay, you have a bunch of money, tax out, deliver. So that political pressure was coming from our legislators, because we're one of the few states whereby we actually get more, our budget comprised more state funds than federal funds. So our legislators are like, well, you got a lot of money in the bank. You're sitting on a lot of balance. Okay, show us you can deliver. So that was a big political pressure internally. So that's kind of how we've been able to do it. And it's a very concerted effort. And I will talk more about later, looking at now when we present to our commission, we even present on the highway cost index, something we never did in the past, to just add layers of how our chairman talks about, we need to mark to market, that we as a state DOT, we can't just think about how we've done things in the past, but we need to be aware of market conditions that we're working within as the state DOT, so that we're not getting all of these prices, price escalation. I'm going to go in front of them that, oh yeah, our estimate was X, now it's 50% more. And they're like, why? So those are some of the things that definitely, we've been able to do. And I'll add more later in terms of what are some of the drivers, key drivers for us within. So I will stop here for now.
Okay. And Pam, how is Delaware managing risk, and how are you adapting your priorities when they need to be shifted?
Yeah, sure. So we do have our, it's a small, kind of effort now, but we are ramping up more and more with our asset management plan. We have a plan now. We have a risk register with trying to really identify, unlike Texas, we don't have we don't have a specified like risk management section. It's really just champions within all of the divisions. So we kind of get, we collaborate on like each of the individual divisions associated risks with that. But yeah, I mean, to echo what Caroline has said, we have risks for the, the motor fuel tax. We are not unlike every other state in the nation that is trying to grapple with how we are going to how are we going to supplement the loss of motor fuel tax with EV, like electric vehicles. That's a big part of our state funding apportionment. We do also try to manage as best as we can, and being as transparent as possible, like, and just explaining to our 62 legislators and our elected officials that they, just to keep the transparency and the knowledge base of, like, for instance, we did get a fair amount of bill funding for Delaware, but a lot of that funding went to like specified programs, and then we were able to like pull projects like up in the CTP, but that 5-year funding is closely, coming to an end. We're like halfway through, so not real sure what the next like transportation funding bill is going to be. Like, that's a big risk uncertainty. So just making sure that we have steps in place to make sure that like we're good on our end. We also we have the ability to like sell bonds and stuff to supplement our revenue as well. And then just looking at like our specific programs, like Caroline had said, and what are the big ticket items for risk in the CTP. Working with the supply chain stuff, the estimates, and not having enough contractors really to like bid on our projects. We don't have a ton of very, very big ticket projects just based on our size. So just, continuing to, we do have a very good relationship with our Delaware Contractors Association. So we listen to like their concerns and, and try to adjust our way that we do things to come up with the best project, the best value of the project. But I do agree with Caroline, there's been a ton of front loading on projects like mobilization, initial expense, those types of like lump sum MOT, those that they can get the costs quickly, that, like front ended on the project to help them boost something. I'm not exactly sure. So we have been seeing that a lot more. Plus, I mean, with the ever changing, making like having to adhere to prevailing wages, like that has been a big challenge. Also, the Buy America regulations have been really hard to, it's just making the costs go up even more of that, part of the federal project. So I would love to, get some more insight with even our 10 days on any of the challenges that they've had with the Buy America, and like Caroline said, with the supply chain issues. I mean, right now we're looking at a 30+ lead time on signal mast arms. I mean, it's just like almost every project has mast arms. So it's just difficult to try to, and you can't get that funding with the federal aid projects. It has to go to PSE, and there's only a certain areas where you can buy the equipment ahead of time. It's just a fair amount of challenges.
Yeah, it sounds like supply chains is a big issue, but I've been hearing a lot about Buy America and how that's making costs just go a lot higher. And yeah, if anyone in the audience wants to kind of give their inputs on how Buy America has affected, because we can actually discuss more about that towards the end, that would be great, because it's something that I've heard at so many conferences, how that's been a big issue. And I'm going to transition on to the next topic about collaborative decision making. I think a lot of it is how are we communicating with all stakeholders throughout all departments. So I'm going to start with you, Caroline. How is Texas collaborating with all stakeholders just to help reduce risk, but also help with all the uncertainty that's coming in?
Yeah, it's a huge undertaking, really collaborating within, but also externally as well. But within, like I mentioned, really when COVID hit, we really had the risk management group. But when COVID hit and then, was really impacting, our programming and our ability to deliver, there was this whole spinoff, and that really, included what I call, we have executive leadership and then the senior management leadership. So there was 4 of us because I oversee all of the planning, the programming, but then there are ones that oversee the engineering side, the delivery side, the letting. So all 4 of us kind of came together, and we really had a risk management person dedicated to working with us to identify the risk and responses and some change management, resources, timelines, et cetera, but also working with the different divisions within the department, the different districts, and everybody involved. So it was this massive collaboration, discussions, working group, going on at that level to really help us come up with what can we do to help mitigate some of the risks. So that was really, even with the 25%, that is what came out of that discussion, and say, okay, how do we stop the bleeding and not having to go to commission all the time. So that was within the agency, and that's still ongoing because there are things that we identified that needs to be followed through. Things like better cost estimation tools and how can we equip our folks with training and other things. It also helped us identify staffing issues, that not everybody doing cost estimation, for instance, has even had the training, processes and methodology tools that we have. Do we have a software program that everybody's using? So it helped us identify how to mitigate a lot of the risk we already have in place internally, but also really working with external customers. Pam mentioned the contracting community. Literally, we're on their meetings every month, whether it's luncheons, whatever activities, talking to them. Because, we can, if we manage a risk internally and not, have our partners and, understanding the limitations, but also what they can do, we realize that at very early stage. So from consultants helping us doing the PS&E and other environmental, all of those, we had to bring them together, the contracting community doing the construction projects. So this massive communication, really internal and externally, went on, and it still continues. One good thing is we already had a lot of that in place. especially with the external contracting and consulting community. So it was easy to be able to have some of the tough discussions with them, on how we really need to collaborate to be able to minimize the risk and be able to deliver, because we can't let projects, and now, they're being delayed. Our commission is asking us, is like, we're letting, but do they have the bandwidth? Because in our case, our target is $13 billion a year. So that's about $1 billion plus a month. And the concern became, are we putting out too much? And the contracting community really had to come back and say, no, we can handle it. So that was kind of how we managed to communicate.
Okay. And Pam, how are you communicating with all your external stakeholders and internal stakeholders to make sure that everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, sure. So being that we are a smaller state, we have one administration building, only 3 counties. It is quite easy to, to communicate internally, and especially with our consultants as well. And we also have a very open communication with all of our consultants, contractors, internal MPOs. So I think internally it's been great. I think the challenge that we have kind of had is just the messaging, the information sharing, and the debunking of wrongs, really, in the public. So with just the influx of social media and there are many more community meetings that are just happening. HOAs have Facebook pages, and and it's kind of like trying to be proactive in the messaging of when our projects are going to go out, the expectation, having a robust project web pages for people to understand not only the projects that are in construction, but also the expectation of projects that are in our planning and longer range, 4, 6, 8 years out for our planning. So our Sussex County, near the beaches and stuff, have just skyrocketed population wise, and the people that have lived there for decades, we have had a lot of implants from New York and Pennsylvania and Jersey, because it is so much less expensive to retire down here. So the influx of people has just been huge, and they are very upset at all the development in the area, and they want the transportation improvements to go right along with how quickly the development is proceeding on. And that's just not the way that transportation improvements work. In Delaware, we don't make land use decisions. They're all done by the counties. So we are somewhat reactive in, we don't get to decide what the county is going to look like. So that communication, being forefront in not just being reactive and answering questions, but really getting the word out there on what we're doing to try to help all of our stakeholders is key. And our secretary is very, very pro communication and going to any community meeting and everything. So that has helped a lot.
Okay. And we are almost up for time, so I'm going to move on quickly to the next topic around emerging technologies, because I feel like technology can help reduce risk, but it can also be a challenge to adapt to it. So I'll start with Caroline. how are you guys emerging, or how are you guys keeping up to date with technology, and how are you utilizing technology? But also, I'm going to throw in the other question: how are you advocating for technology in the state of Texas?
Yeah, and this is an area whereby actually our executive director is not new anymore, but when he came on maybe almost 3 years ago now, he had 5 key priority areas, and one of them was technology. So both internally to improve our business processes, but also how we address actually emerging technologies on our transportation infrastructure and system, from ITS, from connected automated vehicles. So yeah, so technology, embracing that is a huge part of our DNA here at TxDOT. So, but I'll touch on what's relevant to how is it helping us internally to ensure that we can deliver on our program. So several years ago, we kind of went through this undertaking of a new platform where we can put all the projects. So we have about, at any given time, 8,000 projects going on from different stages of development. So all of that goes into this platform called TxDOT Connect. And, you know, that has really been something that's been embraced very well. It's still work in progress, but everybody has pretty much access to it. The districts, any project are not outside, but within the agency, the project sponsors can go in there, update the project real time, live, and then we use that to create tableaus, dashboards for our leadership. So that's a huge thing. And now for us internal, we have dashboards for, you think about, you know, everything. So it's been really great to have that one-stop shop where we have all the information on our program and funding. You can slice and dice in any way. But we have a lot of enterprise, you know, technology programs as well to help us in different aspects of our internal processes and workings. And I know we're running out of time, but just wanted to highlight that AI, we're even looking at AI and, you know, a lot of things to help us in our work efforts. We have actually a chief or director for technology and innovations at TxDOT.
Okay. Yeah, and I think AI, we're going to be seeing a lot of discussions on AI coming soon. I know our CEO was talking about incorporating AI into our product too, to just help make that so much easier to prioritize projects. And Pam, I'm going to go over to you. How has technology helped, and how is the state of Delaware advocating to use new technologies?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it's kind of across the board, probably not on any kind of level like TxDOT, but we have been trying to do more technology in terms of reaching out to our public, being more accessible, using platforms where people can, you know, like drop a pin and show if, you know, and upload a picture that if there's a issue with something along the roadway, we have all of our systems integrated in our transportation management system. So anybody anybody that can report something, they can just dial #77. They can report a road sign, a dead deer, you know, anything like that. So that has helped. We are also trying to bring on a new system to replace our CTP functionality of doing our prioritization criteria in the same program that gets automatically fed into our financial system, because right now it's done separately and those things are just can be prone to errors and such. So that's all kind of internally. And then, like Caroline has said, we are doing the roadway construction, like smart technology of, you know, letting people know how long it takes to get, you know, from point A to point B through a construction site to utilize the smart construction technology. So that I know we don't have too much time, so I didn't want to go too much into it, but I think that that's a small piece.
Yeah, and thank you, ladies. I'm going to go on to the audience questions, but I think there's just so much that you can discuss in terms of uncertainty. So that's why we were pressed for time. But I'm going to open it up to Corey because I believe we have two really good questions from the audience that we can ask.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, and I know we're running a little low on time, but Caroline, you mentioned the 25% rule that your council had implemented. Did that require changing council rules? And can you talk a little bit about the process that led to that?
Yeah, no, one, it did not require, rule changes or anything. We just, went through internally as staff and developed kind of a business case for why we needed a 25% rule, presented it to them. It was extensive conversation. They asked us a lot of questions. And then in the end, we had to, what we do normally with our commissioners, a minute order presented to them that say, okay, we as the commission approve, staff using this 25% rule. That was really all that was required because the funding, like I mentioned, was already available, but it was just not committed. So that's kind of how it worked.
Fantastic. And then our second question, both of you have mentioned contractors, whether it's hard to find them or contractors moving from one project to another and kind of bouncing around. Can you talk about a couple of ways that you've successfully handled that in those situations?
Yeah, I think I can start quickly because I have to jump off soon for another meeting. But in our case, I think both Pam and I mentioned working with the contracting community to understand their constraints was really key to have that candid conversation with them because we were facing the same issues. They were facing the same issues. In some instances, it wasn't because they wanted to bounce. They were trying to do all of the projects as well, but also just scaling, moving equipment. And in our case, Texas, some parts of the state, we were not getting bids. We may get one bid or we get none, and we had to rebid it, put it out there. So those were some of the issues that we had. And until we spoke to them, we did not understand kind of why. So that I think right now we're back to a little bit, better landscape that we're seeing, but of course, a lot of our projects are delayed because of that. But I think we're in a good place.
And Caroline, if you need to hop off, feel free to hop off. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll still hold on because Pam, we definitely want to hear from you if you have any success stories from contractors. But thank you so much, Caroline.
No, thank you. Appreciate. And Pam, thank you. It's a pleasure and honor sharing the stage with you. And definitely Stephanie and Corey, appreciate the invitation and the questions. Great. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
And Pam, if you can kind of share any success stories of how you were dealing with this.
Yeah, I mean, like Caroline said, just really having frank conversations and just understanding, like, we know that you have this project, that's like 2 hours away from this project. Like, please explain what like how you're going to phase the project, because the contractors have the ability to submit a new phasing plan. So whatever we thought how to phase the program or the project, they can totally change that up. So understanding that, like, their mentality and their thought processes on doing that makes the most sense. Plus, we don't know if they're bringing in, crews from other states, or they're finishing a project in Pennsylvania and then they're going to be bringing in. So really just not assuming what we think their answer is, in really just asking them and just shutting up and then listening to what they have to say. And it's been an interesting answers of, that that they're like sometimes willing to take the risk based on the huge incentive we have on a project. You know, it's just we have a very good relationship with our contractors. So it's been a easy, as best as we, you know, can, an easy way of doing things. Plus, we have done a fair amount. We're transitioning more into CMGC projects and design build. So we've been able to pull in larger, like, national contractors and not just our like local Delaware, you know, mid-Atlantic contractors. So that's been good.
All right, well, thank you. And I believe we are at time. So if there's any other questions that come in, we will follow up via email. But thank you, Pam, for joining us. And thank you to the audience for sticking around. And we hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Right. Take care.